Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Single Malt Strategy podcast. It's episode number 88. I'm your host, the Historical Gamer, but you can call me Matt. And today, we're going to be discussing a game that I think all of my co-hosts, certainly I, have been looking forward to for 4 years? It's been a while.
Star Citizen.
And it is slated to come out to early access in just a couple of weeks. By the time you're listening to this, it'll probably be much closer, but it's coming out on November 12th, I believe it is. That game is, of course, Sea Power, being made by Jurassic Games and published by MicroProse. To talk a little bit about Sea Power tonight, I am joined by my trusty co-hosts. First off, we'll start off with Tortuga Power. How are you doing tonight, Tortuga?
That's the first time I think you've revealed that was like a minute long. We were just all waiting here. Like, when is he going to bring us in? I thought you might just do the whole podcast without saying hello.
Monologues are great, right? I'm fine with just talking to myself for an hour. I do it every night anyway. So, but we've also got Wolfpack.
Oh, I can speak now.
Wolfpack, how you doing?
I'm doing quite well. Excited to talk about Sea Power.
Last but
as I have been having no, go ahead.
How rude.
Did not mean to cut you off, good sir.
Don't talk. THG needs to talk.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, gosh, this is my podcast, okay?
Please don't hurt me again.
Just kidding. And last but not least, certainly, our fourth member of our panel here today, our trusty co-host, Finnish Jager. How are you doing, Finnish?
I'm doing good. Thanks for asking, Matt.
Awesome. I mean, I guess, the cat's out of the bag, right? I've already talked enough, and we've already said we're talking about Sea Power. Maybe someone should give a brief rundown on what Sea Power is. How about you, Wolf? You want to give that?
Yeah, sure. Sea Power is a real-time strategy games, very similar to...
About space, right?
It is about space. The name, completely deceptive.
Yeah, sand traps or something.
Yeah. But no, it's a Cold War gone hot naval sim, similar to like Jane's Fleet Command or Command Modern Operations, with actual pretty good 3D graphics, I'd say. And it is not just set around the US and USSR. There are plenty of other factions, plenty of other assets, a ton of scenarios you could make in it. But they have aircraft, submarines, surface ships, all that good stuff. You pretty much just control a fleet instead of a single unit like in Cold Waters.
I wouldn't say it's scenario-based, right? Because, right now, the game that we have access to anyway only has scenario. But it's supposed to have a dynamic campaign at some point, right?
Right. So, at the moment, it is scenario-based, I think. There will be a dynamic campaign. They said Q2 of 2025. A little bit later than what was initially said. Initially, they were thinking there'd be a dynamic campaign preview at this point, but it is just not ready. That being said, there is quite a bit of content with the scenarios you can make, and there's a rather robust mission editor, and they are still actually adding features to that mission editor, even in the early build that the four of us currently have.
Yeah, and the mission editor is pretty neat. Like, I scrolled around in it, it just kind of felt like I was zooming in and out of a big map, and obviously they had a lot of options. Finnish, I know you've been making some scenarios for us, even. Thank you for that. Anything you want to talk about there?
I think the mission editor is going to be kind of the bread and butter of this game and make it the longevity of this game. I think the mission editor is really good in its current state. I've been using it a lot, and I think you can see that there's so much potential in it. So I'm looking forward to what they add to the mission editor. Some things can be a little bit more user-friendly. Other features can be added, but as a whole, I have no worries about the direction of the mission editor and just the game as a whole. But yeah, I've been doing a lot of different scenarios. I did the Oscar scenario, just something that was quick and simple, just kind of show off the Oscar class submarine. And then I've been doing a Cuban Missile Crisis scenario, and then kind of two scenarios. I want to do two kind of mini campaigns. One would be a Kuril Islands, kind of just Soviet Far East area. And then I want to do like a Soviet invasion of Finland with kind of like naval and air combat in the Baltic. So those are two scenarios I want to work on, and the scenario editor needs some more features to make some of that stuff possible, but I think we will get there soon.
I just wanted to pump the brakes on the scenario editor talk, because we haven't really talked about the game yet, and I think like a scenario editor is only as good as the game it's editing scenarios for.
Take this section and cut it and edit into at the end of the episode.
Don't do that. Okay, maybe, I don't know. To tack onto the mission editor thing, though, the entire world is in the game. So you can place assets. pretty much anywhere from the Black Sea to, the Sea of Japan, like Finn was saying.
Yes.
Or whatnot. I mean, the possibilities are kind of endless in that regard.
And that's kind of similar to how like Command Modern Naval Operations works, in the sense that like you have a globe, you can scroll around the globe, import assets wherever you want, place units wherever you want for the sake of a scenario.
Right.
I like the fidelity personally of the Sea Power editor a little bit more than the Command editor, just because Command felt like you're looking at a Google map, but you don't get too close to the ground. It's kind of like, you're much more zoomed out, and I think the texture and the fidelity, at least of what you see on the map anyway, seems a little bit nicer to me. I haven't played around with it a whole lot, so I'm not sure how user-friendly it is.
Well, and like all these different parts of the world have different biomes.
Yeah.
And land textures associated with them, different types of cities, different assets that go into that. So pretty much the game is one huge, 1985, I think, is a good year. I mean, there's ships from the 60s to the late 80s.
87's a better year, but
whatever. And it is just one big open sandbox to utilize all these different ships, all these different weapons, and various assets. And with this very robust scenario editor, make all sorts of scenarios, and eventually when a dynamic campaign comes out, to do stuff with that. It's a big sandbox. I think that's probably a good way to describe the game at this point.
I'd also like to think about the lineage of it. I think it's also
I agree.
important to say that this is, as you mentioned already, Wolf, it's a successor, like a child of Cold Waters, and also a child, kind of indirectly, maybe a cousin or something, some kind of diagonal shift of War on the Sea.
Yeah.
I feel like you can really see the two, how they're related. I don't know, the assets or something about it. When I play one, I can think of the other.
Well, so...
Yeah, well, just to briefly... Oh, go for it, THG.
Well, I was just going to say, just to be clear, I don't think they share any assets between the two, at least not like graphical assets. I don't know what's under the hood.
Well, they're different time frames, so probably not, but I don't know, like the feel of the game.
Well, they're completely different. So, like, to your point, 100%, Lineage is Cold Waters, right? Killerfish Games made Cold Waters, and, that was a Cold War gone hot game that was just a sub-sim, right? You commanded one ship, you didn't command a task force. I know there's a bunch of mods that like make changes, but out of the base game of Cold Water, you command one sub, and it has sort of this it's dynamic, but it, kind of sandboxy dynamic campaign where your goal is to accomplish different missions that you're given and try to stem the tide. You only played as the Americans in that game, but in the base game anyway. And you fight through World War III as an American sub and try and win the war, if you will. After Cold Waters came out, Killerfish Games, which I believe at the time had two sort of core members, split. So one of the individuals kept the Killerfish brand and the name and made War on the Sea, and then the other individual, who was, I believe, the lead, correct me if I'm wrong, Wolfpack, the lead designer of Cold Waters.
Yeah, he was the lead designer, but the guy who is still working at Killerfish and made War on the Sea was the lead programmer. The lead art, designer and lead designer of Cold Waters split off and created Jurassic Games, along with a few other members of the team, if I am remembering correctly.
And I would guess, so like from a corporate lineage, 100% Tortuga goes back to Cold Waters. I would imagine if in that scenario you're not bringing code with you to...
The code is... As far as I know, the code shares pretty much nothing in common with Cold Waters.
Stylistically, I agree. They feel similar in many ways, but obviously one being World War II, that being War on the Sea, and then Sea Power here being a Cold War gone hot game. But, I mean, that's the lineage. Sorry, if you wanted to say anything else, Tortuga.
I mean, the art style is going to be similar because, I mean, the lead... what's the lead artist? The lead art... I don't know. Designer... I don't know what the appropriate name for this title.
I got you, though, Wolf. Yeah, if it's the same art director, then...
Yeah, but he has that same style. Yeah, he has the same style. He knows he has a vision, which I'm sure he was trying to act on a bit in Cold Waters, and, I don't know, brought that over to Sea Power. And, like, to go off your point, I think the ships and Cold Waters look really good. They look, I must say, better than the ships and War on the Sea, which... is the follow-up game to that.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%.
And then these models in Sea Power look even better than that. So
that's even one of the highlights of the game for me so far is just how impressive the graphics are. You mentioned that this game is similar to Command Modern Operations, and it is. I mean, in some ways, maybe even Command on Modern Operations. I don't think this is like a straight replacement because CMO has probably the ability for you to control more units at the same time. Maybe I'm just not experienced enough with Sea Power to be able to control that many units. But I felt it was a little easier to do bigger missions in CMO. But the graphical fidelity in this game is so impressive, and you almost don't want to control that many units because it's so much eye candy. It's a shame to miss a single missile launch.
yeah,
It's true.
no, I completely agree.
Agreed with you, Tortuga. I mean, to me, CMO is a more zoomed out view, which is why I think it's fine that it doesn't have 3D graphics. And I think, most of the time you'd be playing so zoomed out because of how big some of those scenarios can be. I think the scale and the focus is a little bit different. I think the comparison to Fleet Command, Jane's Fleet Command, is a good one. Like, to me, this is very much a spiritual successor to Jane's Fleet Command, or a CMO is very much a spiritual successor to Harpoon. And while there's definitely similarities between them in crossover, I think from what they're trying to represent, there are some differences there.
Yeah, that's actually really good to call this one Jane's and CMO is more Harpoon. That's a very good analogy. I mean, I guess that's not even, I don't know if that's an analogy. It's just, that's true.
Well, it's like everything needs to be some spiritual successor. It can just stand on its own as sea power. Naval combat in the missile age.
And I think in a lot of ways, Sea Power does stand on its own compared to a lot of these other games. Like, okay, Fleet Command, a little more and similar. But I think it's doing a pretty good job at being its own thing.
Well, I mean, Jane's came out, 30 years ago? I mean,
Well, exactly, that's part of it too.
most people who are playing this game, many people who are playing this game probably never played Jane's. Or they think of it as some old blocky 3D naval combat game that was...
Which it is.
Abandonware or something, right?
Yeah. Facts.
Like, they don't think of it as a game they experienced.
Sure. I didn't even realize they had computers 30 years ago.
Or people.
Yeah.
Yeah, people. Did they invent color yet?
Yeah, the game, you played the game in black and white. That's funny.
Let me just clarify. To bring up the references for previous games, I would like to use that more as a way of familiarizing the game to other people who don't know it yet.
To the audience. Right.
Yeah, exactly. I would say that this game is going to be the Janes we talk about in 20 years. Probably people will be comparing things in 20 years to, is it like a new Sea Power? Because
I understand.
We'll see. I mean, it does have some development to go.
Yeah.
Quite a lot, I would think. But it has, what's been struck by so far is it's been a long development cycle. We have waited years for this. But what they delivered with the quality of the assets, the graphics, I mean, you've already mentioned, I think, but even the rolling up of the hangar and the sliding out of the helicopter, this is obviously, the development is long, not because they're putzing around. They're making it so valuable. You can feel the love that every little touch, every asset gets. It makes sense to me that this has taken a long time. And I imagine, although I don't know, that the dynamic campaign is taking a long time because they want to bring that same quality to it.
Completely agree.
And I would say, to your point, Tortuga, when you order a missile launch, in a lot of games, maybe gamers don't really accept this anymore, but certainly in the past, games like this, if you order a missile launch, a lot of times it's just going to be a stock asset. You'll see the missile kind of come out of the sub, but you won't necessarily see anything happen. It'll just be okay, the missile's there and it's flying now. In this game, in the Oscar scenario that you created, Finnish, when you order the missiles to launch out of the Oscar, the skirt, if you will, or whatever it's called, above the missiles, the silos, opens up first. You see that open. You see the gears move on it.
You have the sound effects of the hatches open too.
Yep, and not just, you don't just get the silo piece is opening, then you also see the lid on the individual missile portion open up. And again, you get the sound and everything with that. Then you clearly see the compressed air fire and the missile jet out. And then, you've got the whole, when it's out of the water, then the engine ignites. You see part of the missile fall away. That was sort of the part to get it out of the tube. And then you see the rest of the missile take flight. So, I think folks who are into simulation games might take that kind of stuff for granted because we live in very much a rivet counting kind of simulation world with games like DCS. But like for strategy simulation style games, that's not typical. And I don't think you see that level of fidelity, and this isn't meant as a shot or anything, but I don't think you see that level of fidelity even in something like War on the Sea, because most of the time teams that are making these kind of games, it tends to fit in a smaller niche, and so you don't have the resources necessarily to do all that. And I think, this is very much a game that'll stand on its own. I think the Jane's comparisons are fair because it's primarily scenario-based at the moment. Jane's never, I don't recall it having much of a mission editor, but like the scenarios that the game had anyway, it was all scenario-based. But there was no campaign. I think what's going to make this game like true, and don't get me wrong, I love what we have so far, I'm enjoying it. But I think what's going to make this game sink or swim is like, the game you're talking about 30 years from now, Tortuga, is the campaign. I think that's the piece that will be the standout piece for this game. And I think that makes sense to your point why it's not till middle of next year that it's coming out. It's because they want to get that right.
I like that sink or swim comment.
That's funny. I will say, the amount of detail is stunning. Like even like missile hatches, torpedo tubes opening up, radars turning, illuminators turning to track missiles and stuff. When this game's contemporaries, like War on the Sea, like the radars don't move. Games like U-Boat, the torpedo tube doors open incorrectly. So it's like a lot of these little details that even some of its contemporaries tried to do. This game does better.
What do you guys think about the UI? Like, how approachable is this? Tortuga, you've been playing it a bit. What's your experience playing the game?
Oh, from an approachability standpoint?
Sure, or whatever you want to say.
Give me a second to collect my thoughts. Somebody else go.
Well, I guess I want to say, the visuals are obviously amazing and the attention to detail is obviously amazing. And we can see then they've spent valuable development time making the game's combat system, the combat mechanic, equally as impressive. I think we can talk about that too, because it feels, guess what you think of naval combat.
Yeah, I think the game is surprisingly approachable. That being said, I'm like familiar with a lot of this stuff to begin with, so that makes it kind of hard to say. Like, for the record, none of us have played a tutorial. There are no tutorials in the game with the build we have. I do believe that is supposed to come by the time this game rolls out into early access.
There's a menu option for tutorials, so I would expect it. I wouldn't think they'd put that there if it's not coming.
I know they are planned, but just to say, we haven't done that, and I think generally I hopped in and was able to do quite well, figure out the UI. The UI is relatively intuitive. You see speed, you click on speed, you change your speed. It's all on one bottom bar that is pretty legible, in my opinion. The UI is pretty clean, and it gets the job done. It's not convoluted like some other, like Command Modern Operations, where you have menus inside of menus, for example.
Yeah, the UI really puts the focus on the game. The ships, the models, the combat.
Yep.
The UI is not distracting you from that.
It did take me a moment or two to realize, like, if I want to change the speed, I guess I click down here. You can issue certain commands by right-clicking on the model of the ship, right? And then it gives you a pop-up menu, like tooltip options. It's
very similar to Dangerous Waters, actually, where you right-click. You can right-click on assets and be like, engage with, 2 Mark 48 torpedoes or whatever, which is quite nice as well.
Is there a reason why sometimes when I order a salvo of 4 missiles or 8 missiles, the AI decides, or not the AI, but the ship only fires 2, and it won't fire more until the first 2 have been shot down?
Is it like you're using a cruiser and they fire 2 surface-to-air missiles?
No, so like I was playing...
Because some ships have a limited amount of illuminators that can track targets, so you can't just...
Yeah, I was wondering if it might be that, but I was playing, there was a Kerch scenario where I was commanding the Kerch, a Soviet cruiser, and I spotted some American ships, and I wanted to try and overwhelm their missile defense as Soviet doctrine. That was a big piece of it, right? Like saturation strikes. So I wanted to order it to fire, because I only had 8 anti-ship missiles, so I wanted to fire in 2 quad launchers, and I wanted to fire all 8, so I right-clicked, I looked at the weapon I wanted to use, I right-clicked on it, it gave me an option, fire single, 2, 4, or 8 missile salvo. So I chose the 8 option, because there were only a handful of targets. I figured I'd take out the most valuable one, make sure it gets through. And the ship, you saw the turrets with the missiles turn, raised up, tubes opened up, 2 missiles fired, Nothing else happens.
Some weapons, like some tubes, you can right-click and fire a salvo of 8 whenever you only have 2 missiles or 2 torpedoes loaded in the tubes, for example. That right-click salvo option was just added, actually, in a couple of patches ago at this point, too, with what we have. So I'm sure it will be refined and some things like that change. But, for example, I was using an Oscar-class submarine. They have 2 kit torpedoes loaded in their 650 millimeter tubes, and I had to fire those 2 torpedoes even though I clicked salvo of 4, and then they commenced reloading, which took 10 minutes. So it's possible there's reloading going on in the background or something like that. I'm not sure exactly what missiles you were firing.
SSN-3 or something. I'm not sure. It automatically fired a new one as soon as the first got shot down, but I was like, this is silly. I'm going onesie twosies. And the Oscar mission that Finnish created, I kept hitting 8 because that's the most you could do, and I had like 20 in the tubes. And it did everything. It was just like, all right, we're gonna keep going here. So that one worked great. But I was just curious. I mean, obviously this is a game that is very much in early access. Bugs and things like that are gonna get squashed. I would like to see a little bit more feedback about stuff like what my, if I try and issue an order and it can't do it, why it can't do it. If something happens, like sometimes it's very easy to miss and there's a lot of stuff going on. So I think the feedback, like it feels like there's a minimalist approach to the UI, which I don't have a problem with. Like it keeps the focus, as Finnish said earlier, on the game, on the visuals of what's going on. But there are times where I wish that it gave me just a little bit more options for feedback.
Yeah.
If I click something and it doesn't happen, why doesn't it happen? Or whatever that might be. Is there a countdown, like when your ship is doing something that it'll like tell you when it's going to be done? Because that also kind of seems minimized. I know you've talked about it, so I know it's there somewhere.
So you can hover over your weapon systems on the bottom bar, and it'll tell you they are reloading, rearming, whatnot, things like that. I do agree there is a need for more feedback, like, sorry, Captain, reloading or whatever. And again, I'm sure that is something that will be changed because they do show like missiles are tracking a target from this ship's radar. Like you do get that sort of information in the game, but this seems like a niche topic for folks who maybe are listening though and haven't played the game.
Yeah, if they haven't played it, fair.
What maybe we should bring up is that there are 2 ways you can play the game. You can play it in the tactical mode or on the map.
Right.
I found that there's some missions I use one entirely and some missions I use the other entirely. So that means that's a good sign. They're both effective.
Yeah, you could command everything from the map if you wanted. This can be a completely 2D game.
Basically, it's like a CNC or CIC map, right? Like you've got little squares and half circles and whatnot that represent the different units on the map, and you can issue all the orders you need to from that screen and select the units and whatnot. You can maximize that map so that it takes up the full screen, or you can leave it as kind of like a window in the lower left-hand corner as well, right?
Indeed.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to them hopefully adding a system where you have the map and then you can have the ship in a smaller window.
Yeah, so Dangerous Waters and Fleet Command kind of had that sort of thing. I do agree, because that would be nice.
I was actually expecting that, so I was surprised to see it wasn't in there, but it also wasn't a deal breaker for me because, I don't know, you can tab, and then tab is the hotkey to go between, and you can just tab back and forth.
That's what I've been doing.
I like the fact that you had a good experience so far, Wolf. I had some difficulties with, this is not really approachability, but probably just more early access bug type stuff, but I had some issues with formations. I was setting up some complicated formations and stuff, and then next thing I knew, I assume it's a bug, but maybe it's something about the UI that I don't fully understand. That there's a formation editor, a formation editor, yes, but there's actually also a formation manager where you see all the formations, and those can expand or collapse, expand to show all the ships that are in the formation. And I don't know what double-clicking the ships in that is supposed to do. I was using that as a way of just moving to the ship. But at some point when I was clicking on them, they were leaving the formation they were in. Is that just a bug, or is that supposed to happen?
I'm not sure. I actually haven't messed with that new formation manager as much. Again, another feature that was added. They are adding features. Well, there's multiple ways you can flip back and forth through ships. They made it pretty easy. You can number them, for example, so you can use 1, 2, 3, and 4 on your keyboard to flip through ships, and the mouse buttons, for example. If you have side mouse buttons, they will flip back and forth between ships or aircraft in a formation. I'm not sure about the formation manager. I know that's a very work in progress feature.
Yeah, I'm assuming it's just a little bug. I mean, yeah, so that it would be nice because that's basically the outline. It's like the Paradox outliner where you see your ships. I like having that. I mean, if they wanted to make it a little bit less intrusive because it's like a pop-up box right now, they might actually want to do something like an outliner where it's like white text and transparent background instead of being like a blocky box that you actually open. That's minor. I'm sure that with Nil's skills that we don't need to fear, something improved will come. But the formation editor itself as well, like one thing I was very surprised to see is it's very cool that they show the direction they're going and you can edit the formation to be relative or not, which means that, if you're moving it north above the lead ship, it'll either that's based on, let's say I'm traveling west. Then if we were to turn right and then we would come north, that would shift from north to east. So it'll just say relative. But one thing that I didn't like was the fact that there's no way to like orient my ships with the lead, like relative to north. I don't know how to explain this well, unfortunately, but
I thought you could use true bearing and edit your ships in that formation editor, but...
So what I'm saying is if your formation is moving northwest, then you have to orient everybody according to a northwest line. And if it's at some weird angle, let's say like 350, you have to, they give you the circles and they give you every 30 degree lines for every 30 degrees. And if my ship was going dead north, then yeah, I could put one at 30 and one at negative 30. But if my ship's going 250, I don't know where 20 and negative 50 is. Do you know what I mean?
I get what you mean, but this is a very Tortuga problem.
I don't follow any of this.
Okay, yeah. I wanted to be exact with my damn formation. I want this guy to come 1.4 miles. Yeah, okay. But, the cool thing is this game offers that. I should be first, extolling the game for allowing me to micromanage my formations.
Yeah, you can make your own formations. It's not just like click button, line ahead, or echelon or whatever. You can do whatever the heck you want. I do think it would be nice to have a drop down with those options, like echelon formation, have my ships automatically get into an echelon or whatever. But the fact that you just open up this panel and you drag little dots around and your ships will automatically move into these formations is pretty good. And it's a pretty darn cool feature.
I can't help but wonder if the feature was in part built because of some of the experiences that folks had around War on the Sea. I know they're not affiliated games, but I remember formation edit, like going into the missions where your formation was initially, it always felt weird, and like it could be improved upon.
To add to that, the AI is quite smart, and there are quite a few complaints with the AI and Sea Power. I think just watching YouTube videos gives you a false impression of the AI in the game. I do think the AI is overall pretty darn good, all things considered. And I am comparing this to its contemporaries. That being said, I mean, collision avoidance, they automatically defend pop chaff. You order a ship to fire at a target, they will conduct a maneuver so their missiles can engage that target. I don't know, they've done a lot to make the AI comply with your orders so you don't have to micromanage it as much. If a ship's evading, they'll automatically turn to evade and, try to defeat a missile, things like that. So there's a lot in that AI department. And again, watching a video of an Oscar-class submarine, for example, in a perfect position, striking a American carrier group, and then complaining that the AI is bad. I mean, what was the AI supposed to do in that scenario, for example?
I'm glad you made that point. I think that's a very important point to make, that the viewers of your videos, for sure, they don't have the full picture of playing the game just yet.
Right. And just watching YouTube videos can lead to a false impression. I mean, and then also you mess up in this game, and I mean, people are watching these videos, they're very excited for the game, they're very passionate. And they're like, I would have done XYZ, you're trash at the game, which okay, that's true. Sure. I'll take that. But it's just wait till you get your hands on the game for yourself to judge the AI, because initially, and I don't know if this was with you guys as well, but I was quite impressed by what the AI could do. Again, judging it purely based on the game's contemporary games.
Yeah, I'll say with the mission editor, I'm creating these missions and I know where I place the units, and then I test the missions, and I'm still surprised at things that happen. Like a unit makes a move that I don't expect, or it goes somewhere else, or it fires some torpedoes or whatever, and I'm impressed because I think I know what's going to happen in this mission I've created, and then it throws me off guard.
Previous comment was a Tortuga comment. This one is very much a Wolfpack comment.
Which one? The stop whining in the YouTube comment section?
Shut up, you whiny commenters. Get good, son.
Yeah, okay. I'm just saying, it's like just watching people play the game can lead to a false impression of what the...
Well, it's true.
No, so I agree.
Yeah, okay.
I'm just being a dick. I would also say that in my experience, and maybe this kind of goes back to, I know we're kind of bouncing all over here, but Tortuga had a good comment earlier of like, how do you play the game? Well, like, I think one thing, if I was going to say, what do you need to do to be good at this game? And I don't know that this is the most important thing, but what I would say is, if you're not versed in naval combat and you're going into this game, you might think, turn on the radars. It'll let you see where the bad guys are. Well, it also lets them see where you are, right? So, like, one of the things I think the game does a very good job of is modeling sensors and how you can use those effectively, or how you can use those to your own detriment. And what I would say with regarding the AI is like, yeah, I was playing a scenario the other day, turned on the radar in a scenario where I probably shouldn't have, gave away my position, and within a minute or two, I had like 40 harpoons inbound, and my fleet was getting obliterated. So, like, it punishes mistakes if you're stupid, and, that's the mark of at least a competent AI, I think. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of exploits or things that you can find holes in. Again, it's an early access game, and it's a very complicated game, but without trying to break the game anyway, my impression so far is that the AI does a competent job and it punishes stupidity, which I think is at least a good starting point for a game like this, where, you obviously want the AI to pose a challenge, and if it's taking advantage of your mistakes, it's doing just that.
Yeah, I mean, to bounce off, the AI isn't perfect, though. Just, I don't want to be, glazing the game or anything too hard over here. I really like the game, but the AI is very much work in progress with some things like carrier operations and anti-submarine warfare operations. For example, P3s won't just blanket sono buoys all over the place at the moment. That is something that is, again, work in progress. But if they won't actively drop sono buoys and search for subs. They will launch helicopters and stuff, but there's some things in there that could be more robust.
I was going to ask what your experience, or anybody's experience, has been with using carriers, because I think Jane's Fleet Command air operations always felt very small. It's like, oh, you're going to launch a 1Z, 2Z strike or whatever. Like, it never really felt like, oh, this is a super carrier with a meaningful air wing. It felt like it was, I guess the equivalent would be like playing Age of Empires and be like, I clicked 5 dudes and I guess that's a legion? Like, what's your impression of air operations?
I can let anyone go. I feel like I'm talking a lot.
I have not done much carrier ops yet. I've been using aircraft just in missions, but...
I liked using the Tarawa until it was blown up, but that was pretty fun in the Hormuz Strait mission, where you got to launch a whole bunch of A8s and a whole bunch of Sea Cobras. I get so distracted just watching the elevators go up and down and all the aircraft rolling out that I'm probably to blame for my own losses. I don't care. It's too much eye candy. It's one of those things where I need someone to, I need the AI to just do itself. Conduct the mission for me so I can just watch.
Air ops are... Again, really cool. Like you said, the elevators go down. You can see into the hangar. Additionally, all the aircraft on the carriers have the correct liveries, which is pretty darn cool. Again, that's the sort of attention to detail we're seeing in Sea Power here. And you can launch, you have, 20 Tomcats on a Nimitz. Someone's going to correct me. However many Tomcats on a carrier. And you can launch all of them. You can launch every single aircraft on your carrier in real time in the game while other stuff is going on. You do have to recover these aircraft. They have limited fuel. I will say that's the one time where I was like, this is a little overwhelming. Was with, that many aircraft in the sky, because I did launch a bunch of aircraft to try to handle a threat. And it's like, man, this is a lot of planes to manage. And I do think the devs are aware that is a A particular point where this game has difficulty is managing that many aircraft. That being said, I don't think there's any games in this genre which do not have that problem. I think when you're managing that many aircraft in command and modern operations, it is an issue. It can get overwhelming. And it's something that a lot of these games kind of struggle with. So I am curious to see how the Sea Power devs handle it. I think the formation editor is a step in the right direction.
In command, I'm almost 100% sure it wasn't available at launch. I know well after it came out, they added like a mission planner functionality, which I think was supposed to help with that. I haven't played it a lot since then. I agree. Like when you've got,
I mean, it's not an easy task. You were put in charge of managing this task force, and then this task force air wing, and then all of these aircraft split up into different squadrons, potentially engaging different threats with different types of missiles at different times. It can get overwhelming, and I guess it does suffer from that issue a little bit, especially if you launch an entire air wing like I did.
All while you're also trying to still manage your fleet, right? Like you still got other things going on. The game is pausable. Use the pause button. I know, like, it's tempting to just, I'm always the kind of person who's like a real-time game. I want to play it in real time. I'm not going to pause a lot, but I find myself pausing a lot in this so that I can string together my orders. I also like that it has a time compression functionality. I wish the time compression was a little bit smarter, where like,
I agree.
If the enemy's shooting missiles at me, maybe pause it for me, like Silent Hunter does.
It should drop down. It should drop down to 10.
It might drop down to 10, but 10 is still real fast when you've got a missile going Mach 1.
Yeah.
You can also do 0.5 times time compression too, so you can...
Slow-mo, baby. I will say, I see a lot of other folks playing the game or whatnot using a lot of time compression. I barely play with the time compression. But maybe I'm just like some freak.
I think it depends on the mission.
Sure.
And it depends what you're doing, right? So the is it Dong Hoi, the North Vietnam shore bombardment Easter offensive mission in the 60s? Or sorry, 72. That mission, like, the enemy starts on top of you. So if you're going to compress, you're already going to be basically destroyed before you have a chance to do anything. Whereas I think it's valuable cargo or whatever, where you've got to sink some NATO ships and you're playing as the Soviets. You basically have to put a helicopter up in the air and then fly it a good 20 minutes-ish for it to get like close enough so it can start IDing some of the contacts.
Yeah.
So I think it depends on the mission, right? Like I think, but where I went back to, like, it would be nice if the time compression slowed down. I might not want to watch a helicopter fly for 10, 15 minutes, but if I hit the time compression and all of a sudden a surface-to-air missile, like, it might be dead before I have a chance to hit pause or slow down or anything like that. So it'd be nice if the computer did a little bit more of saving you from your own.
Just get good.
I mean, that's fair. I'm bad, but
Exactly.
that's why I'm asking for help.
You got to lock in.
You got to sit there and watch that helicopter for 20 minutes, THG. Come on, buddy. What are you doing? That's your chance to interact with chat, which,
Right.
I've heard you don't do very often.
No, I just ignore Tortuga.
Damn.
So fair, but if it's an issue of skill, then it should just give me a pop-up and say, your helicopter's going to die. There's nothing you can do about it. Now watch it as we kill it in half speed, so you get to experience the...
Oh my gosh. The pity party.
True.
I agree. I think something similar to Silent Hunter would be good, where it automatically locks you to certain time compressions. It kind of already does that, but if 10's too high for you, then I can see how that would be problematic.
I think it is. For the exact scenario you pointed out, I've had a helicopter. I was probably going 10x, so I didn't actually realize that the time compression slowed down at all. A missile fired at my helicopter, and I was like, damn, I probably was going to lose it anyway, but it would have been nice to have the time compression go down to 1x when you have like a new event. So it's nice that it does down to 10x, but maybe they can either make that adjustable, or I honestly think that you don't have that much time to react in these situations. It's good to
bounce off that. A lot of Cold Water's modders who worked on like .mod and stuff are working on this game, and they do want Sea Power to be moddable, very similar to Cold Water's. I think a lot of that could be easily changed to, personal taste or whatever. I am excited that the game is
yeah, that's fine.
Potentially quite moddable. I am looking forward to that.
I heard about the dot mod guy working on it.
Yeah, it's Dot and then a few other guys who actually worked on that mod.
What haven't we talked about with this game yet? I think we've nailed the fact that this has amazing graphics. It's got great... Oh, I wanted to go back to the gameplay a little bit because I wanted to really echo this point. I think it's very valuable to reinforce that the combat in this game is just so good. I feel like it could be used as a simulator for real militaries because I was kind of the same way. I was trying to be a little bit conservative about using radar, but I noticed that, hey, when I use radar, I get people launching at me. And it's like such a good lesson teacher. It just teaches you, okay, and then the next scenario, okay, you messed up this time, and you get better. And I don't know, and then I don't know if error search radar, okay, I'm leave that on, but I don't put it on my surface radar.
Yeah.
These little things that just make the game feel so real, and I love that side of it. It just feels very like, another word for real, like believable.
Yeah, I mean, these games are focused around stealth.
Yes.
Knowing when to switch off or use your sensors, and it's all these games. Like Fleet Command and Command Operations is the same way. Like, you just blast your sensors all the time. And it's like you're just lighting a big beacon towards you. Managing when to use this, when it's best for me to utilize this, is a big aspect of gameplay.
Actually, Finnish and I have talked about this before in like strategy games, which are like operational level. I feel like a game which is based around stealth, and this is kind of stealth based. It's not like we're sneaking around like Thief or something like that, but this is really one of those where when you have this, I'm not sure what's going on, and this limited information, and the game doesn't give you all the full information, which I have to say, like, Cold Waters was very guilty of doing. It gave you way too much information. But this, you don't have that information. And that has always been such a compelling game experience. Like, that not knowing, and the fact that they really penalize you for trying to know, so you really have to weigh that. To me, it's a little bit like War in the Pacific-esque, but obviously at a completely different scale, where you have to kind of just flick on your sensors for a moment or just get very brief. You have to infer a lot of things, and getting that wrong is what often leads to really fun situations. I mean, normally not in the best way, but they're those, the ones you talk about with your friends the next day, like, oh, you won't believe it. I thought he was over here, but I couldn't, find out with my radar because then he would nail me. And then it turns out he was over there. I don't know. That's what makes this game great.
This game does fog of war quite well. Like, you pick up radar emissions and you get a band on the map showing this contact could be anywhere within this band. You don't get an exact position on it. You can narrow it down. There's things you can do to triangulate that radar contact or that radar signal, but it just doesn't automatically give it to you, which is nice. And figuring out where that is and firing at them first is essential generally, because I mean, someone commented on a video and it's like, this game just seems like a bunch of whoever fires first wins. And it's like, well, yeah, that's the whole point. You need to find who is actually hostile and fire at them first before they realize you're hostile. And it's the same in like this game reminds me a lot of Dangerous Waters. But it's just like in Dangerous Waters. Yeah, you figure out who's hostile and you fire at them first before they even know you're there. That's the ideal scenario.
Yeah, Tortuga and I love the cat and mouse kind of stuff. We've talked about this before. The cat and mouse of World War II carrier warfare, searching, finding, sending out your fleets. I think this game does do that, like Wolf says. You're identifying targets, you're trying to figure out what's out there, what radar emissions are out there. The fog of war is really good.
Well, and that's like such a huge thing in naval combat is the person who shoots first usually wins, right? Like look at Midway. It all comes down, not all of it, but a big chunk of Midway comes down to the side which got their planes on the enemy carriers first.
Exactly.
Won decisively, right? Like that is, and I think it's even more true in the missile era because I guess if you have your radar on the system, it doesn't happen, but it's not how you should fight because you're giving away your position. The other thing about this is if you find them before they find you and their radars are off and you fire your missile strike, you've got missiles closing the gap with them before they have any idea. They can't shoot it down because they don't even know it's coming until it gets often much closer. And the same right back at you, right? Like if the enemy's fired missiles at you, you might be dead and you don't even realize it yet. And so like that just compounds he who shoots first wins in this kind of a game and this kind of a warfare, and that's built into the doctrine of naval combat even even to this day, finding the enemy without giving away your position is paramount, be it submarine warfare or be it surface warfare.
And I've had the situation where I flip on the radar and then it picks up missiles inbound. And you're like, oh my God.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep this on. I'm gonna keep this radar going because I've had that same scenario.
So that is so cool. Yeah. Better turn this on for my anti-aircraft missiles now because it's gonna be needed. Yeah, with like also the kind of like cat and mouse thing and the stealth. Like I love just to put active sonar on for like 2 pings and figure out if I hear anything and then I turn it off. I feel so cheeky and smart, but it just seems like you never want to give away your position.
Exactly. Like giving them ideas. Like, okay, this ship will flip on its radar for, 2 cycles, 1 cycle. And then this other ship, 5 minutes later, which is, 30 kilometers to the east, I'll have it flip on its radar. So you keep the enemy guessing.
I never really fully realized the utility of an AWACS either, right? Like, that's the other thing of, like, airborne platforms with surface search radars, right? There's a reason an aircraft carrier is almost never going to have its radar on because it's got other platforms to do that and to feed it the information it needs without giving away its position, right? Use your helicopters, right? If you can, if you've got AWACS, use your AWACS to give that information to your fleet. It's a reason all these ships and everything like that are data linked so they can share that information.
Yeah.
So that you can get the info you need to be lethal without giving away your position. One thing I think is relevant as we're talking through this also is, and I know you mentioned it, Tortuga, in our group chat, if you are coming to this game from cold waters, it is, 2 things. One, I think it models combat a lot better. Like we're talking about how lethal it is to shoot first. I never really felt like that in cold waters. In cold waters, I felt like, all right, if there's a torpedo in the water, I can dodge it.
Bring it on.
If there's 6 torpedoes in the waters, I can dodge it.
Yeah.
I'm going to fly this thing like a fucking fighter jet. And I'm just going to bob and weave at extreme angles where like my whole crew's probably face down on the deck because no one can stand. They're getting thrown all over, but I can pull these huge, banking turns because of it's this third person view. This game doesn't, I don't think, has that level of maybe arcadiness to it. And I think that goes back to it models combat differently, right? Like I'm not manually steering my submarine with my WASD keys to dodge
although you can. It is important to say you can do that if you want. Like that gameplay option is available to the player. But
I remember Tortuga, you were talking about like, you were getting used to the game's sort of layer of command being a little bit more removed, a little bit more abstracted, as opposed to, cold waters. Obviously, cold waters, you only command 1 ship, so maybe that's a big part of it. But I don't know if there's anything there you want to kind of talk about.
I mean, I think you're referring to when I first played the one-on-one submission, I didn't find it like as engaging as like a cold waters experience. But I think that's just because this game, I mean, it's still good, by the way. But I feel like if you're going to do a one-on-one type situation, you might as well play like a pure sub simulator, which this game is not. And it still does that whole encounter pretty well for not being a dedicated sub simulator. But yeah, I mean, that's it. In that situation, it's basically like playing CMO in a one-on-one event. And, I don't think that's its sweet spot. And I don't know. The game has a lot to... I think that there was some issue with submarines. Finnish might have been mentioning, not during the podcast, but I thought I saw you writing about that.
Yeah, there were a little bit, and they've been... Those bugs have been squashed after a couple days, so they were on that really quickly.
Okay, so I'm not sure what the reason for it was, but yeah. And anyway, I think that this game, you could probably play it as like a substitute submarine simulator, but my biggest enjoyment is getting some fleets out there, and I feel like a fleet of like 5 ships is like the sweet spot for me. I really enjoy those kind of like, it's very tactical battles. A lot of the scenarios are already built to be exactly that. I think that the game knows what it is, and you can get away with. We'll see what goes on with like carrier operations with 20 aircraft and all that, if they can end up pulling something like that off. I've seen already they have formation. You can launch those formations and stuff, and I'm guessing that they're already trying to get ahead of it, right? They see that there's a problem, they're trying to fix it.
Yeah.
The game's sweet spot for me is this like tactical fleet. I mean, it's just so many scenarios in real life are not 30 ships going around together. So many scenarios in the modern world are like, yeah, there's like 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, just very few ships that need to deploy, especially as the United States, they have ships everywhere. So then they would deploy like 4 ships here or whatever. Those scenarios are really fun for me.
Yep, I'd agree.
How well does it model? Because I've had my helicopters shot down, but like, how well does it model air-to-air combat? I know there was one thing in like War on the Sea that was always kind of silly. It's like you got these big looping, banking turns, but like it never really felt like it did air combat particularly well.
No, War on the Sea was not good at air combat.
In Sea Power, in the Missile Age, a lot of the air combat takes place at larger distances than gun range. You can use guns. I do think things get a little wonky when you use a gunfight, but a lot of stuff's over the beyond visual range. I would not expect Flight Simulator DCS level of fidelity, although I think in some ways this may be on par with the DCS AI. But it handles it rather well whenever your aircraft, like they'll launch their air-to-air missiles, peel off, whatever. There were some scenarios where my aircraft would launch a radar homing missile like a Sparrow and then turn away and break radar contact, which obviously not something you would want to do when firing a Sparrow. Because that missile does not have like fire and forget capability.
Given how effective or ineffective they were in Vietnam, maybe that's what all the F-4 pilots were.
I don't know. Maybe it's just like things like that. Some AI things definitely. Again, the game. I think this is the first time this many people have played this game. We are finding issues, of course, with the AI and things that need to be changed. There is a reason this game is releasing into early access. My initial impression was, I'm surprised this is going into early access. But the more I've played it, the more I'm like, okay, there's some things. The devs want to do quite a lot. They are quite passionate and want to refine a lot of these mechanics.
Does anybody know? I'm curious. One of the big things in Jane's was like land attack with tomahawks on land attack targets. Now, this game takes place...
If there's land attack type missions, you have troop invasion possibilities, I suppose, at least in script, maybe in some kind of scripted event, because the Terwa, the landing, not the aircraft carrier, what are those called? Landing
amphibious, whatever.
Amphibious landing dock or something.
Yeah, whatever they... so those things, they have... they are carrying their Chinooks, and you can launch them, so... I think you could put marine load up and launch them up.
Well, what I was going to ask was, like, the game takes place from the 60s to the 80s, I believe. Now, the 80s is kind of, I think, when the Tomahawk really starts to become prevalent. What, like, is land attack against targets, like, a big thing here, or is it mostly just attacking other fleets? Because obviously the Dong Hoi scenario, you bombard some stuff with your guns.
Well, I can't speak for the scenario for the campaign, but you can make scenarios doing any of that. There are shore batteries, assets. There are land-based assets which you can target and potentially destroy. So depending on the scenario you cook up, then yeah, you can make land attack a big thing. As for TLAMs, I'm not sure if they're actually implemented in the game yet. I have no doubt in my mind that they absolutely will be. But there's B-52s, so you can just carpet bomb stuff, and there are tanks, tank assets, infantry, all sorts of stuff like that. Actually, maybe not infantry, don't quote me on that one, but other land-based units like BMPs or whatever.
Yeah, I saw Bradleys and Abrams and I think like M113s.
Yeah, assisting your land troops in that, I think will be probably a pretty interesting part of the campaign, and I'm sure a lot of people will cook up some pretty darn cool scenarios with land-based units going at it. There's even not surprisingly, there's land-based radar stations and stuff which you can utilize, which is can add some interesting gameplay things and SAM sites and stuff.
I need a linebacker 2 campaign, and we'll call it Flight of the Intruder.
Exactly. Again, it's one big sandbox, and people can make missions or campaigns or surprisingly large amount of scenarios with the entire world modeled and such.
The scenario editor, I think the earliest date you can pick is 1947, so they need to add some more assets for that time period and some of these other time periods that the game covers, but you will have the ability to go that far.
At least according to the Steam page, question mark. They kind of advertise it.
Oh, we're reading Steam pages again, like our top games or upcoming games episode.
Yeah. Where's SBocracy? I think it said 60 to 80, but that's awesome that the editor pushes it forward, especially to your point earlier, Wolf, about, wanting folks to be able to mod this thing. Like that I assume that would be a big part of mods, adding new assets and things like that.
Sure. And the possibilities for expansion with this game are huge. You could go earlier, you could go later. I think the Royal Navy is something that is currently absent in the game. That is something they do want to add, and if the game's successful, will be added, right? But that is a large undertaking to add, Royal Navy assets and stuff. Anyway, that's Sea Power, baby.
Tortuga, you got one more thing you want to share with us?
Oh yeah, I do. I wanted to take a little bit of a step back and just reflect on the fact that this is how have we not mentioned this is being published by MicroProse. Did we mention that already? I don't think we did.
Initially. THG did.
I did in my 1 minute monologue.
Yeah, which I paid.
It's not a hooded horse.
Sorry,
game,
Tortuga.
Sorry.
I did reference SBocracy. That's hooded horse.
Yeah, but I wanted to. Yeah, actually, that reference is what brought this idea to my mind. So this is, I think, I would dare to say this is the first big MicroProse game that's been released. I mean, that's pretty subjective. We had at some point. I mean, they've released several other things, even like the Carrier Command 2 or whatever that I think was relatively popular. But to me, this is like the first of the big MicroProse games. And the other one, there's only two in my opinion, is Task Force Admiral in the near horizon.
Yeah, I think that's coming sooner than we think as well, too.
Oh, that'll be great. This will be a great 2025 then. So what do we think that the impact of this game being released will be on MicroProse? Because this in a little, I don't know, I started to get this impression, like, what is MicroProse doing? Are they going to really be like a reincarnation of the previous glory of the name? Or are they just going to kind of use the name to publish some stuff? And then, I don't know, is it going to be something special or not, basically? And this is the first time I see that, yeah, okay, it could be something special if they're going to go with this. So anyways, thoughts on that?
Did either of you listen to the 3 Moves Ahead interview that was with David Ligeti a couple of weeks back?
Absolutely not. I would never listen to a competitor podcast.
I have not listened. Apparently he was on it. So I just, he was on it with, I think just Len, the main sort of host of the show now. But yeah, so I would agree with you, Tortuga, that it's sort of the big, well, when MicroProse said, hey, we're back, they had 3 games they announced then, right? It was Task Force Admiral.
Yeah, Second Front did come out.
Second Front and this. And Second Front came out, but I feel like that was always going to be a little bit more of a lower...
Squad leader is just not for everybody. You just can't...
Right, that's what I was going to say. Like, it was very niche. It was a very niche offering, and I think it did a good job of what it was trying to do.
Agreed.
But it's not a mass market game, and I don't know if this is or not, but it certainly looks like a mass.
Oh, this has got...
Yeah, I think
this is better.
I think this game has the potential to break out of the simulation niche.
Agreed.
I do think this game has more potential to break out of that particular niche than anything we've seen since like Silent Hunter, which, I mean, yeah, it's a darn thin, field of games out there. You got U-Boat, I guess, which is broken out in a pretty interesting way. But I mean, other than that, I do think this game has wide appeal because of how many different play styles, as we've talked about in this podcast, are available. You can control the ship with the WAS and D keys if you wanted. You can play from a map. You can only look at the map. You can never look at the 3D graphics if you really wanted to, right? And again, 150 ship assets with the whole world available. I mean, there's so much you could do.
I mean, the only thing I would add to, like, I do think it's worth calling out High Fleet was a pretty popular game that's also published by MicroProse.
That one was fun.
Yeah, that was a surprise.
Extremely well developed, I think, for that one.
I think that's been their most, like, and I saw folks talking about the game who are not, like, hardcore strategy game, niche folks. Like, that's probably been the most successful, I think, game that MicroProse has launched. Carrier Deck felt like it had a minute where folks were, Carrier Command 2 had a minute where folks were talking about that, but that faded pretty quick, I feel like. High Fleet would be probably the one that I would think this would surpass as far as being MicroProse's like.
This is a MicroProse flagship game for sure.
Yeah, they need this to succeed. It will, but they need to. I think they're Like everything else that they've kind of published and before, they've been waiting for this moment. It's been, keeping them afloat.
That was good.
Another naval pun. Keeping them afloat to this point, and now they're like, we can put this out, and this will put our name back out there for kind of these naval historical simulations again.
Yeah, and I don't know that, I don't want to, I think they've done some good things. Like, Regiments has certainly found a bit of an audience. Tiny Combat Arena, which I don't know how much there is to that game, but I enjoyed playing that game. I think they've done some interesting stuff, and there's been some other stuff like the B-17 Mighty Eighth Redux, which, frankly, I was not very impressed with. It felt like they just kind of grabbed the code and kicked it back out the door and said, it's a remaster. They've had a wide variety of quality, I think, on the games that MicroProse has done to this point.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree. To me, this feels like the first that they're launching with hopes of a broader audience that, frankly, they can't afford to miss on. I would think, based on what we're looking at, they've poured a lot of resources into helping Nils make this thing, and it needs to find an audience, and I think it will, but it needs to find an audience, I think, for them to maintain their momentum of gobbling up every former MicroProse IP. And
yeah, I think the one thing we can say about it is, I don't know if the Triassic team would have been given this much leeway on development time, and things have really taken a long time, if it wasn't MicroProse. I don't get the impression that they're really forcing people to put out a finished product or else, or just scrap it. So that is where I would say we should give some credit to MicroProse, that they've let this game develop, and in this case, the developers are not letting them down. So cheers on that.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to see where this goes.
I'm very excited for it. I really, really do like the game. I hope it's successful, and I hope we get more games like this in the future, or it and this game continues to develop, because there has been a naval game drought. I guess there's been a handful. You have Rule the Waves for your people who like Excel spreadsheets.
Yeah, Tortuga. Psh.
What the heck are you? What?
I'm just, it's just it's been so long since we've had something like this. The last thing that's really like this is Jane's Fleet Command with 3D graphics and this, level of gameplay. Cold War gone high, whatever.
Cold War's kind of, but again, it was a different scale, right? You're one sub.
Sure. There's been a few more sub-sims. So you got U-Boat and you got Cold Water since Silent Hunter 5. But even that's a pretty long time, from 2011 to Cold Waters is 2017.
War on the Sea, Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts, Ultimate Admiral Age of Sail.
Okay, fine. Maybe there's a little more, and maybe there's a few more than I thought. You're right. The market's oversaturated, my bad.
Close down, shut it down, don't launch it. No.
Cancel Task Force Admiral, cancel Sea Power. That's basically Wolfpack's recommendation here. If you're going to get anything from this episode, Wolfpack just wants all game development to cease at this moment.
That's THG. I'm there hasn't been anything like this in years, and THG's over. There's been so much.
Cancel THG instead.
I'm just saying, I'm very excited. The hype's lived up, in my opinion. And this has been my most anticipated game for 3 years in a row.
You're going to have to find something new. What are you going to...
Yeah, no kidding.
You know what he's going to do next year? He's
Task Force Admiral, baby. Let's go.
No, you know what it's going to be? It's going to be 2025. He's going to be like, my most anticipated game of 2025? Sea Power's dynamic campaign coming in Q2 of 2025.
I fully suspect this dev team will deliver on their promises. That's my opinion as well, which is important for an early access game.
One last question: does anybody know the price for this game? And is the dynamic campaign? I don't think there's not any plans for that to be DLC, is there?
No, it will be coming in early access. We don't have an actual price for the game as of recording this episode.
A week left in October, so by the time this airs, there may well be a price available online.
Yeah, depending on how fast THG edits this bad boy.
Oh, can I just say one other thing? I know we're talking about how beautiful it is. I think my favorite thing to look at in this game is when you launch a missile strike on a task force, particularly on an American task force. And you're on the missile view, you're watching the missile go in, and you start to see the the missile defense weapons come up. It just looks so fucking sweet to watch, like, oh, there's another missile shooting out of a tube. There's another missile shooting out of a tube. Oh, and there's the close-in weapon systems. It looks just the missile eye view coming in. It looks fucking amazing.
Yeah. And then like 5-inch shells desperately trying to blow the missile out of the sky and stuff. It's like, yeah, it gets, there's a lot going on. Like, and by the way, I have 80, probably over 80 hours in the game at this point, and I've had one crash. So, I mean, that's also something people may be interested in hearing. The game's pretty stable, all things considered. There's some performance things here and there when you have, 80 anti-ship missiles, which I have tried. But, it's pretty good. Yeah. Yeah, so it's pretty stable.
Oh, and there's no nukes, so stop asking. No nukes.
Mods, baby.
I don't need nukes for this kind of a game, frankly. Like, it's just a game over button.
I think SSBMs will be an interesting asset to have because, I mean, that's what a lot of this doctrine focuses around, protecting those, or destroying those. But yeah, just like actually launching nukes, it's like, okay, I mean,
I guess it'd be cool to see a trident like pop out of the water and light off, but
oh, hell yeah.
But the actual, like, it's not useful in a naval engagement sort of a way, other than can you protect it long enough for it to shoot its missiles?
Yeah. No, it again, be interesting to build scenarios around, but actually utilizing the weapons, not as much, in my opinion.
Also makes for sick thumbnails, I love the
shocked
screenshots
face.
Of this game are beautiful.
You'll never know what I did to this, Soviet task force. Never believe it.
Good episode.
Fun. I could talk about the game for quite a while, obviously. I do very much enjoy it.
I'm sure I could have organized the discussion a little bit better, but I think honestly it just sort of shows our excitement that we're jumping from one topic to another and we just excitedly want to talk about things. I think this is a game we're going to continue to play, continue to talk about, as the development progresses, as we get next year, hopefully toward the dynamic campaign coming out. Excited to see what everybody else's reaction is to getting to play this. This feels to me like this could well be like the combat mission beyond Barbarossa style war game that breaks out of containment and into the mainstream, and also litters the internet with thousands of some good and some very poorly made user scenarios.
That's what I'm excited for.
That you can, that you can download. That I just remember, like, that was the internet was so different back then. But going to websites and there being like 900 combat mission scenarios, like this is the kind of game that you could have something like that. Now I don't know if we will.
Yeah, and the game will have workshop support at release and early access, so we will be able to share our user-made missions around and play them, no matter how good or how bad they are.
We already shared them. You finished, they gave you one, and I gave me the same thing, just slightly different.
Yeah, I'm excited for you all to get the game and start cranking out missions, enjoying it, seeing what it's all about, because I don't think very many of you will be disappointed.
I hope you guys enjoyed talking about Sea Power. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for hosting, Matt. You're the only one to be called by their real name. You're like, you can call me Matt, and everyone's like, don't call me by my real name.
Thank you, Mr. Gamer.
Except for Tortuga, who says Eric, but then we just ignore it. But yeah, that's gonna do it for today's episode of the Single Malt Strategy podcast. We will be back hopefully before too long. I know there's other games coming out in November as well that I'd like to talk about. Maybe we'll do something on Armored Brigade.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that.
Armored Brigade 2, which will be coming out soon. Or at least, I don't know if it's actually coming out or if they're just dropping the embargo soon. But in any event, that's going to do it for today's episode. Until next time, this is the Historical Gamer. You can call me Matt. For Tortuga Power, Wolfpack, and Finnish, thanks for tuning in, and we're out.